I call Shadow Minister James Wilde.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to speak on report stage. And I'll be focusing on Amendment 4 and new clauses 5 and 6 tabled in my name. This bill was developed under the previous Conservative government to increase the Crown Estate's ability to compete by providing a broader power to borrow so it maintains and enhances the value of the estate and the income derived from it. And the assets managed by the Crown Estate, which total £15.5 billion, are not the property of the government, nor are they part of the sovereign's private estate. They are held in right of the Crown. An appropriate scrutiny of the Crown Estate is therefore essential, which is what the amendments I've tabled seek to ensure. And over the last decade, the Crown Estate generated £4.1 billion for the nation's finances and believes that the measures in this bill can enable it to generate an additional £100 million in revenues to the Treasury by 2030, which is a prize worth seeking. Before speaking to the amendments in my name, I turn briefly to new clause 1, which proposes devolving Welsh functions of the Crown Estate to the Welsh Government. And I wonder if the honourable member has support from businesses, for example, for this change. The splitting the Crown Estate at this time would introduce risk in terms of assets and revenue streams. For example, in committee, we heard about the potential problems and complexity in terms of licensing of the Celtic Sea, which the honourable member just referred to. And as set out... I will give way.
I'm very interested to hear his arguments against devolving the administration of the Crown Estate to Wales. Can I just ask him very simply, his government, last government, devolved those same powers to Scotland. Why does it work for Scotland, but it's too complicated for Wales?
Well, we're dealing with the bill in front of us today, and to do it at the moment would be too complex for the licensing reasons and other reasons that have been set out during that committee stage, which could undermine the returns that could actually be made for taxpayers, whether in Wales or in other parts of the country. And the honourable member for Mid and South Pembrokeshire spoke to Amendment 5, a version of which was moved in committee on his behalf. And as I said in committee, we recognise the amendment has been revised, but we're cautious about putting more obligations onto the Crown Estate than Clause 3 already does, and there is a danger of the overreach he spoke about. We'll certainly listen to the response to the Minister to his honourable friend's speech with some interest. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the kernel of the bill is expanding the power of the Crown Estate to borrow, but there is a lack of parliamentary oversight on borrowing levels. Amendment 4 in my name would limit borrowing to a net debt-to-asset value ratio of no more than 25%, which could be amended by affirmative regulations. This is, I believe, a proportionate check on this new borrowing power. And when pushed at committee, the government again stated limits on borrowing are best set outside legislation in a memorandum of understanding. But a memorandum of understanding is all too easily altered at the stroke of a pen, a point that the Minister didn't address in the committee stage. And at the very least, will he give an undertaking that any changes to a memorandum of understanding will be reported to Parliament? Given Parliament is being asked to remove the restriction on borrowing, and the government agrees there should be a limit, I struggle to see why the cap should not be set in legislation with the ability to amend it. Borrowing more than 25% carries risk which could ultimately affect the sustainability of the estate, which is why the government itself has accepted there should be a limit. And as this is a new power affecting assets held on behalf of the nation, it should be subject to control, and this will be a perfectly reasonable check, which I hope members will back. Madam Deputy Speaker, I turn to new clause 5, which would require the Crown Estate to seek Treasury approval for disposals amounting to 10% or more of its total assets, and to then lay a report before Parliament. Disposal of assets has been an important part of the discussions throughout the proceedings of this bill, both here and in the other place. Indeed, Clause 5 was introduced after pressure to ensure that Treasury consent is required before disposing of any of the Crown Estate's rights or privileges in relation to the territorial seabed. And this is a welcome safeguard, but can the Minister conceive of any circumstances in which the government would approve of such a sale? Can he give a commitment that national security would be to the fore in any consideration of such a proposal? And would ministers come to the House before agreeing to any such disposal? At committee stage, the Minister set out the current process dictates the government will be consulted on any potential sale of a nationally significant asset. Can the Minister say how he defines nationally significant. He also argued requiring Treasury consent for large disposals would undermine the flexibility needed by the Crown Estate to operate commercially. But the amendment simply requires Treasury consent to be sought and then reported to Parliament. The Crown Estate is not going to suddenly decide tomorrow to dispose of an asset. It will go through its internal processes, its business cases, those papers, a version of which could then be provided to ministers, and then depending on the ministers, that could be a very rapid approval process indeed that does not compromise flexibility but ensures accountability. These assets are held for the benefit of the nation, and we should ensure some form of transparency and scrutiny. I now turn to new clause 6, which would require the Chancellor to lay before Parliament any partnership agreement between the Crown Estate and GB Energy. This new clause is fundamental, as without being able to see details of the agreement, we obviously do not know what has been agreed. And currently there is a lack of clarity over how this new partnership will work. We are still concerned this new partnership has been created for political rather than economic reasons. And on this side of the House there is scepticism of what the government says about GB Energy. Because during the election, Labour claimed GB Energy would cut energy bills by £300. Bills are going up. The chairman of GB Energy has refused to say when people could expect £300 off their energy bills. But we do know that GB Energy will spend £8.3 billion of taxpayers' money, and we know it won't generate any energy, won't be an energy supplier, and it won't save families that £300. So we are concerned that at all stages the government has resisted greater transparency here. And when pushed at second reading and in committee, the Exchequer Secretary said that while the partnership agreement itself will not be published, given it will be commercially sensitive, the Crown Estate is committed to publish information relating to the partnership as part of its existing annual report. But the provisions to include reporting an annual report could mean there is a considerable lag between such an agreement becoming operational and then only limited detail being published. Frankly, that's not good enough, which is why we have tabled new clause 6. It's important there's transparency, as we don't know how much Crown Estate may invest in GB Energy's projects. We don't know how much of the funds from this borrowing power could be used for that purpose. When I asked the Crown Estate how they would decide between projects GB Energy favours and others which may have a higher rate of return, I was told there'd be a business plan for the partnership. So further lack of transparency, as I assume the Minister will not be placing that before this House. I also asked about decision-making for the partnership, and the response was the intention is that both parties will seek agreement on investment decisions whilst retaining their own independence. The Crown Estate will not be compelled to agree to anything which it does not wish to in fulfilment of its statutory duty. I note the use of the word intention and compelled. There is a lingering concern that ministers may pressure GB Energy and the Crown Estate to invest in the Energy Secretary's pet projects. Clearly, the chairman of GB Energy is very close indeed to the Labour Party, and nominating a Labour Party donor as the nominated chairman of the Crown Estate adds to this. So publishing this agreement could actually help allay these concerns about the government's intentions. And if the minister contends that the agreement, which does not yet exist, is too commercially sensitive, will he consider making a redacted version available? Equally, as I raised during the committee stage, would he consider providing the agreement to the Public Accounts Committee on a confidential basis? As a member of that committee previously, I know of the precedents for that, for example, in January 2018, when the Cabinet Office provided a risk register of strategic suppliers to government, a very sensitive document handled by that committee, but providing assurance on behalf of the House. So I remain concerned about political pressure being put on the Crown Estate and would urge members to support our new clause, which would simply require the Chancellor to lay the partnership agreement before Parliament. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Crown Estate Bill will deliver the modernisation the Crown Estate delivers, and the amendments we propose will ensure appropriate oversight and transparency as it delivers on its primary duty to maintain and enhance the value of the assets and the return for taxpayers. Thank you.